Welcome, everybody, to the Sapien podcast. Very excited today. I have a doctor with me, Dr. Olatunde, and she specializes in reflexology and really with alternative medication-free methods of pain management, amongst other things. Thank you for so much for joining us, doctor.
Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to sharing information with your listeners.
We love it. We love it. So you're in Kenya, aren't you?
No, I'm not.
Where are you coming from?
You are speaking to me from Stress Capital USA, aka Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow. Exciting there, huh?
Most definitely.
All right. Well, we're gonna leave the politics to them, and we're gonna focus on healthcare today, right?
I love it.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So let's get into it. If for those of you not watching, we've got a little picture of her book called Reflexology Today, A Family Affair. And I would imagine we'll be talking a lot about that today. But
Mhm.
I guess, to just start, it really seems like you're this holistic healer. Can you tell us about how did you get to this place? A little background so listeners can understand.
Oh, let me see how I can put in a short, condensed version.
Yeah, yeah, just so somewhere to start from.
Okay. Basically, my background, I grew up with home remedies. And back then, doctors used to come to the home. You didn't go to the doctor to the office, they came to your home. And so as a child, I'm seeing this, I'm saying, oh, wow, they are healers. That's what I want to do when I grow up. I want to be a doctor. But by the time I got to college and I saw what doctors learn, I said, oh, no, 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 that's not what I saw doctors to be. So I'm not going to go that route. So I changed my career and went into social work. And as a social worker, I covered the whole gambit in social service, working from infants all the way to seniors and every type of social service you could have. But as a social worker, the thing that concerned me more than anything was the fact that everybody was going to the emergency room for their doctor. And I said, oh, something's wrong with this picture. And all of a sudden, the energy sparked up again. I want to be a doctor. But at that time, that's when natural and alternative healthcare was opening up. So I went back to school and got my training to become a naturopathic practitioner. But before I trained as a naturopathic practitioner, I had already had training in reflexology. So all I did was add reflexology to my naturopathic practice. And so that's kind of like in a nutshell in terms of how it all got started.
It makes sense. Listeners will notice that I have a lot of naturopathic doctors on my show, and I've worked with a lot of naturopathic doctors, and I think it's so important because that perspective is, very much missing
Mhm.
in traditional Western medicine. And I think, at least when I was training, which is about 15 years ago now, I trained very traditional internal medicine, and it
Mhm.
was still poo-pooed on. Like I don't have a better word. It was not, you know, the way I look at it is, wow, so many amazing modalities that we can
Mhm.
incorporate. What a unique perspective, to
Yeah.
practice any kind of healing with, and but
Yes.
totally like just demeaned. And so I never bought into that, and I appreciate you uh, sort of spreading that message because it's one that needs to be spread because this whole medication, surgery, nursing home, ER nonsense is not making anyone healthier, is it?
When you look at it, I mean, when we look at the state of affairs as it relates to health, we are in a sick society, and that's not healthy. And I always say, like, back in the day, we used to talk about healthcare prevention. And when you say the word prevention, I mean, like now that's so archaic. Nobody even knows what that word is. What are you talking about, prevention? But that used to be the foundation when we talked about health and wellness. How do I put preventive care in place to support my health and wellness maintenance piece? And like, all of that stuff is just blew out the window. And it's hurting us, and it's hurting us in a very bad way.
And before we get into the reflexology piece, I really want to,
Mm-hmm.
most people probably don't even know what it is.
True,
And then
true.
specifically, I'm sure you have a lot about the book, which I think is important to talk about. That something that struck me, you came to this from a social worker perspective. And I think that's fascinating. I work very closely with my social workers. I think that that is the real, they're not just the eyes and ears, but the spiritual piece. They're often the providers that are telling me about what's really going on in a
Mhm.
case. I do a lot of hospice work. I'm a board certified
Yes,
hospice physician, and my
yes,
social workers in my hospices sometimes are the leads in cases because
true.
I want to understand the family dynamic. Where are we at with the energies in the room, for if we don't need to
Yes,
necessarily say religion, but like the energies, the energetic
exactly,
environment, so
exactly.
that I can put myself in as a doctor and use my tools, my medicines, my manipulation
Yes,
in a thoughtful way.
yes.
So how has, and maybe a generic question, but still, how has the being a social worker really affected your day-to-day practice with your patients today?
I think, that's an excellent question because in social work, one of the things that you do is a lot of documentation. And in order to do documentation, you have to do the one key thing, which I always refer to as, because I connect reflexology with touch, and the first touching tool in healing begins with listening. That's the most important healing tool, is to listen. And as a social worker, because you're always listening, and by listening, what you're doing is you're allowing your patients and your clients to be expressive about what's going on with them. And that opens the door for you to be able to work more effective with them because you did the one thing, you paid attention to them. And what's not realized is that when they are talking about what's going on with them health wise, they are putting themselves in the position to take back control of their healing process because they're hearing themselves as well as the message that they are sharing. And that comes from, my social work experience because of the listening, the documentation. But it also comes from the standpoint, which I'll share this piece with you, is when I wrote my book, Reflexology Today, I wrote it back in it was about 1987. And
Oh,
yes, this is the second edition.
oh,
I wrote it in 1987. And when I wrote it, I was on my way to China to study reflexology. And when I got to China, one of the things that was so fascinating to me was the fact that the doctor spent anywhere between an hour to an hour and a half with their patients before they even addressed treatment. And then after that, they would bring the whole family in because now we're going to look at what's going to be our preventive approach for the family before we get to the treatment. And for me, that became a confirmation because the reason why I wrote the book, because I felt that at least one member in the household should know how to do some basic reflexology techniques that they can use in terms of relieving pain and stress. So, like, pulling all of that together makes a lot of sense when we start talking about our practice, because as you open, and even being a physician, you know that being able to spend that time talking and listening to your patient and client is not a part of the protocol for whatever reason. But your clients and your patients come to you for one thing and one thing only, and that's to relieve pain. They're not interested in anything else. They want pain relief. And that's how my whole concept came into existence, where I put together the approach of relieving pain first before treatment. And to relieve pain first begins with listening. And then from listening, we then move into incorporating the reflexology as the technique to relieve pain. And then from there, we look at the integrative approaches that will accompany the pain relief, because one of the things most people don't understand is where you're feeling the pain is not the problem. It's somewhere else inside the body. And that I always connect a topic that no one ever focuses too much on is pain and stress go hand in hand. You do not have pain without stress, and you do not have stress without pain. And you have to understand what that is. And when I talk to my clients, patients, I say, stress is something that happens outside of your body that you bring inside. And when you bring it inside, what it's doing is it's looking for a way to come out. And since it can't come out through the normal channels of elimination, it may see the back as being a weak area. So now I'm trying to get out through the back, or it may seem that the head is a weak area. So now I'm going to try to come out through the head and you have a headache. So when you understand your pain as it's connected to stress, it's about what you internalize. And as you internalize it, it creates the pain that eventually can wind up becoming a diagnosed illness. And so you have to be able to learn how to put all of that together. And that's how you get to the point of improving the quality of your life from a wellness perspective based on integration.
I love that. It's such an important message. So many patients that struggle with, call it pain in general. I know what you're doing with that word. It's all sorts of
Mhm.
maladies that end up being just pain. And it's so hard as a provider to be like, yes, I know your lower back hurts, but the MRI is fine, the X-ray is fine, everything looks fine. It's, sometimes your doc, you're saying it's in my head, I'm crazy, and it's
Yes.
like, no, you're not crazy. And yes, it kind of is in your head. It's in your spirit. It's in your soul.
Yes.
It's in
Yes.
your like nervous system, which is an
Yes.
electrical system connecting to a deeper system within our
Yes.
world that, we can't measure exactly, but it's connected.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. I've had a number of um, sort of, we'll call it alternative healers, somatic work,
Mm-hmm.
psychedelic work, and sort of the one thing that connects all of it, it seems to be spirituality. Because it
Yes.
seems to be like the thing that just it's the same, and it's the thing that's always missing when you go to the traditional doctor and they're like, here's a pill or here's a cream or here's a x-ray. It misses like that acknowledgement of the spiritual part. And it's not even necessarily that the doctors should be spiritual gurus. I get it. That's
Mm-hmm.
not like their jam. Fine.
Mm-hmm.
But there should be, I did 15 years of training, not even an inkling or a suggestion that there's something more than like the physical body.
That's an excellent point. And coming from a physician, I value highly what you just said, because just like pain and stress is connected, also you got to look at mind, body, emotion, and spirit. That is also connected. That's the holistic step in terms of your healing process to the pain stress connection. It's a full circle in terms of how it all operates. And once we can understand that, it makes a big difference in terms of what I like to say, taking back control of your power to heal yourself. Because as you talked about the spirit part, All of us are able to heal ourselves because the body is designed to do that. And our power, which we may not realize it, is in our hands. That's your healing tool. What's in your hands? And we all have it.
So that jumps into your modality that I want to learn more about because I don't know that much about it, and I know my listeners don't. So let's get into the reflexology piece. Let just what is it? Honestly, most of us don't know. We've seen a sign on a shop or a wellness
Mhm.
center, and unless you've gone in and tried it, it's not super popular. But I'll tell you, in my world of sort of patients that are open to alternative medicine and pursue it, it's something that keeps coming up. So when I saw the
Mhm.
opportunity to speak, I was like, this is it. This is where I get to learn about it. So can you just start like most basic what it is, and then
I
maybe
certainly will. It will
yeah.
be my honor.
Thank you.
Reflexology is the art and science of working specific reflex nerve ending points that are found on the hands, the feet, and the ears that's connected to various organs and systems in the body. And the best way I can kind of explain that so that it's more understandable. If you ever look at a chart of the anatomy and look specifically at the nervous system, you see how all the nerve endings, they begin in your head and they run straight through your body with ending points on the hands, feet, and ears. Now, this is a way to understand it. Think about electricity in your house. If the power goes out, you go and you flick the circuit breaker, and all of a sudden electricity comes back on. But if the circuit breaker doesn't work, you have to call an electrician. And then the electrician would say, well, we got some type of wiring problems and we got to work that. See your reflexologist as being the electrician. Because what we do is we work with the nerve endings. And what people don't understand about the nerve endings and the nervous system, it is the connection point to the brain. And the brain is the communication command center. And the messages flow through the nerve endings to the brain. And what we're looking for when we're doing reflexology is what is the problem in that nerve ending to that particular organ or that particular system in the body? Is there a blockage? Is there a disconnect? And what we're looking for is to be able to reconnect, be able to put that energy flow back in place so that the nerve endings can now deliver the message to the brain. Now, here's an example that can kind of give a better picture. Say, for example, you hit your funny bone. And so what's the first thing you're going to do when you hit the funny bone?
Shake that hand or
Now, there's something that you're going to do.
oh, you're gonna wrap that up.
No, the first thing you're going to do.
Scream.
There you go.
Got it.
The very first thing you're going to do is do a verbal release. It could be nice or it could be not so nice, but that's going to be the first thing. Then a message goes from the nerve endings to the brain. Trauma in the elbow area because it heard the verbal response. Then what's the next thing you're going to do?
Touch it.
You're going to touch it. You're going to start rubbing it. And then the message is going to go up from the nerve ending to the brain. Release the body's natural pain relievers, known as endorphins. And this is what a reflexologist is doing. It's releasing the body's natural pain relievers so that you can do what? Improve circulation, bring relaxation, reduce pain, and relieve toxins and impurities that may be in the area. So that's the concept of how reflexology operates via the nerve endings communicating to the brain, because we have 11 systems of the body and every system needs something different. And so when the messages are delivered, now the body can do what it normally does to assist in the healing process. And I say that to say is that what people have to understand, and I'm going to give you a little tidbit here as it relates to reflexology. I always tell my patients, I use the example of the automobile. The automobile is an exact replica of the inside of our bodies and how our body operates. And we never think about that. So we go buy a car, and then the salesperson will say, well, you know, X number of months you need to go take the car for the maintenance. Or you drive in your car and all of a sudden the engine light comes on, and or you hear some clanking and you go to the mechanic and you say, well, I hear this, I hear that. Now, you're talking about a machine, and a mechanic knows how to do what it has to do from a mechanical perspective. But guess what? When we go to our doctors, we take our bodies into our doctor's office just like we do our automobile. And so we go in there and we tell the doctor, oh, I got a backache and my back is hurting me. And what is the doctor going to say? Well, before we can tell you what's going on, we need to do some tests to find out what's happening. And then we're going to give you a prescription for the pain. But I don't even know what's causing the pain, but I'm giving you the prescription for the pain. I'm saying that we've got to change that dynamics. You have to understand that when you go to your doctor or whatever practitioner you're using, it's a two-way street. It's not one way. The practitioner and the client patient have to be working in sync with each other. As you give, you receive. As you receive, you give. It's not a one-way street. And we've got to stop seeing our practitioners as being the healer. The healer is you. You are the healer. All a practitioner does is work with you in assisting the body in the healing process. And when we come to understand that, now we can both be on the same page in giving you exactly what you want. Relief from pain and finding the solution to what caused the pain, because we're working together collectively and cooperatively as one.
So good. I don't know if you're aware, but one of the tenets of osteopathic medicine is that the body has the ability to heal itself. So
Yes.
it's very much anchored into my mind. And yet, once I got into my training, that was quickly forgotten about. That's something that's like they're real proud of when you're in med school, but then you get in your training and it's completely forgotten about, and you're just back to traditional Western medicine stuff. You know, another thought before I ask my questions is just having your practitioner touch you is so special. I mean, forget about the fact that you're coming to it with so much knowledge and intention and understanding of these nerve connections and how to manipulate them and all of these things. Just the touch, and that's really lost from healthcare. Um, you know, I make it a point to try to put my hand on someone's shoulder, but it's funny. Like I used to do it every time, and now I've realized it's a different time. A lot of people aren't into it. I have cases where I'll walk in and I'm just feeling very loving and giving, and I'll put my hand on someone's shoulder and I feel like they're not into it. They don't want that connection. They're there for whatever it is that they've decided that I'm supposed to do for them. So I've really gotten out of that habit, and I always ask, like, before I do anything, I'm like, what's your goal today? And that answer to that question kind of helps me know, like, yeah, let me have a nice conversation and put my hand on their shoulder, or they're just here for their azithromycin because they were convinced that they need it and they don't want me to do anything else. And that's fine. Everyone's different. Um,
Like what you said, and I want to give a little comment to that. One of the things that's happened to us is our definition of touch has changed because it's turned to something negative. And that's another form of what's not healthy, because as a people, we are touching. And the example you gave is so prime, specifically in our young people, in terms of being able to touch. They are scared to death of touch because they have no understanding of the power that lies within touch. And when you say that, a patient may say, oh no, I don't want that, or because society has told you that touch is something bad. But we've got to understand that in order to heal, you're going to have to be open to touch. Otherwise than that, you're not going to get the result that you're looking for that relates to healing.
And at least my observation is the people that don't want the touch are the most anxious. Those
Yes.
anxious people have every single time I'm super stressed out. And as you described, that stress manifests itself in
Yes.
physical ailments, and those physical ailments do a vicious loop in your mind, causing mental ailments. And now you
Yes.
find yourself at 50 with type 2 diabetes and cancer, and you're like, what happened? And no one knows why you got cancer. And it's like, well, I can't prove it.
Mm,
Maybe there's a whole lifestyle that we've forgotten about, our
mm,
hunter-gatherer origins, where we were
mm,
very intimate with each other. And
yeah.
maybe we evolved like that for hundreds of thousands of years. And now all of a sudden we got scared and we
Mm,
forgot what we are as animals. And by
yes.
disconnecting from our animal selves, we have disconnected from our health. I love
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, that sums it up. And we've got to start focusing on that.
back to your reflexology. So
Mm-hmm.
so it makes sense. In my mind, I kind of picture it a little bit, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm more familiar with acupuncture, and there's different parts of the body that sort of correlate with different organ systems. Is there sort of also when you were describing the hands and the ears, I'm envisioning in my mind the homunculus, which is a part of your brain that sort of is in size proportion to where all the nerve endings are. And for those listening, definitely Google homunculus right now because it's super cool and it's a really beautiful image that people have created of how it represents the body. But am I on target there? Is that sort of how you guys are looking at those nerve endings, or is it broken down differently? Or am I completely wrong?
It's somewhat the same. The only difference is like with acupuncture, in terms of they're dealing with specific nerve points where it's actually located on the body.
Right,
What we deal with is the whole nerve ending points, and they're ending on the hands and feet
right.
based on their connection. And that's what we're working specifically. And when we focus on the nervous center, on the nerve endings, we're focusing specifically in terms of opening the lines of communication. And when I say that, as a physician, when you give someone pain medication, what it does, it numbs the nerve endings, so it stops the line of communication, which means that, okay, I can't feel the pain. But when that wears off, the pain comes back up again. So I have to go numb it again. And in that, when you look at it from that perspective, what you've done now is you're putting the body in turmoil because the body's first line of defense that's fighting off this toxicity that's entering the body, and then you keep sending it, it breaks down the body's defense mechanism. So now this creeps into somewhere else inside the body, and now you got havoc going on, all because you shut down the communication center. And so our whole focal point is to be about making sure that the communication center is delivering the message as it needs to be sent to the various organs and systems in the body.
Yeah, and to give an example, like an opiate blocks the mu receptor. So you're literally blocking the receptor that tells your body to feel pain. So you're completely disrupting that signal. Other popular drugs, like maybe gabapentin, that a lot of people know, are nerve conduction sort of inhibitors. They decrease the flow of this information, and that's how it helps with pain. And yet, you know, we all know those are bandages. Those are not healing modalities. Those are ways to
Yes.
get over something bad that happened, but they're definitely not long-term solutions to pain. So, so I understand the nerve endings and you're manipulating them through touch. Now, is reflexology a diagnostic tool, a treatment tool, or is it both? Like, if I come to you with like pain in my shoulder, are you, what if I told you I have pain? Can you make a diagnosis using reflexology? Or is it's a fun question, right? Or is it a way to sort of treat like, hey, I have shoulder pain and you know where to go to address that shoulder pain or something like that? I've always wondered that.
Oh, coming from a doctor, that's an excellent question. And let me see how I'm going to answer that. Um, Historically, I'll tell you this, historically, reflexology is over 5,000 years old. Historically, reflexology was the very first diagnostic tool in the beginning. That's what reflexology was originally used for, was to diagnose. And you see that in the charts where you see the pictures of in the tombs, in the Egyptian tombs of reflexology, that diagram, that's what it's talking about. The reflexologist was working on a person's foot and a person's hands, and the message was from the person who was receiving, was saying, please don't hurt me. And the reflexologist response is, now, I'm not here to hurt you, I'm here to serve you. And so that's the original. Today, 2025, I don't think I can um, adequately say that I'm diagnosed. And the reason being is because the word diagnostic belongs to conventional medicine, and we're not allowed to use that word in our practice. And so basically, what we would be doing more so is addressing it from a therapeutic treatment approach for whatever the pain problem may be, for the sole purpose of opening the lines of communication so that the nerve endings can do what they normally are supposed to do in the communicating with the body, what needs to happen naturally, uh, medication free. That's the concept.
Um, some history for those listening, reflexology and a lot of the alternative treatments we've talked about in my podcast are really old. These are ancient modalities, and it was very, very popular in America. In the late 1800s, there was a group of doctors, MDs, who said, you know what? I can help people by manipulating their bones and their muscles and their joints. And that's where the birth of osteopathic medicine came
Yes,
from. And the
yes,
first osteopathic doctors were actually MD DOs because there
yes.
wasn't a thing called DOs. And then DOs have since evolved into really just traditional doctors. So I think a lot of that went away, but still the ideology is there. Then later in the 1920s, I believe, the government commissioned something called the Flexner Reports. And it was basically part of our branch of government that went around the country and looked at all of these different healing modalities and said, you know what? We don't believe in them. We only believe in what we have now called traditional Western medicine, which is drugs, surgeries, and, is scientific instruments basically to navigate health. And they cut everything out. So for people that are listening, they're like, oh, reflexology. It's like, no, this is the original way we helped each other. And it was not that long ago that we deleted it from our custom or from our normal. So it's important. It's been 100 years. That's nothing. That's nothing. And all of these people that really believe that in the last 100 years we've done a lot to help people, just look at our overall health in this world, and you'll understand that we did some good things, but we did a lot of bad things by cutting out these really potent and effective modalities. So could you describe a bit of what that kind of treatment might look like? Is there, are needles involved? Is it touch? Is it massage based? Is it, because I've never done a reflexology treatment. So for me, I have no idea what the actual physical touch part looks like.
I love that question, and I'm going to answer it like this. Remember, I said when I opened, I said all of us have healing power in our hands. That's where healing begins, inside your hands. And all of us are born with the power to heal inside our hands. And we don't know this. But I'm going to share something else that you may not even remember. Everybody listening has had a reflexology session and don't know that they've had one. It goes back to when you were a child. It also goes back to as a parent taking care of a child. There's a little activity that everybody can remember. It's called This Little Piggy. And if you can remember, this little piggy went to the market and how you were turning the baby's toes circular backward and forward, what you were doing is reflexology, because all of the nerve endings to the head are in the toes and in the fingers. And as you are activating and stimulating the fingers and the toes, you are activating the nerve ending to send a message to the brain, bring relief, calm the body down, relax, take out the stress. That was your first approach to reflexology via this little piggy. So this little piggy may have been done as a fun activity, but if you think about the babies, they will maybe start giggling or they may start calming down. Some may even go to sleep, but it's that nerve ending stimulation. So from that perspective, when you think about reflexology, here's the activity. I'm going to give you a little, show you a little technique that you could start doing in terms of whenever you get stressed, whenever you get anxious, whenever your energy level is rock bottom, how you can lift it. When you're flying off the wall and you need to lower, this is what you do. In reflexology, we use our thumb. And with the thumb, what we're going to do is we're going to do what's called a bending. We're going to take our thumb and bend our thumb like this. This is called the reflexology walking technique. On the palm of your hands, you're going to take your thumb and you're going to walk in the direction from the wrist area all the way to the thumb, moving across the palm of your hand, going all the way over to the base of your fingers. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what point, and that's not what's important. What's important is to activate the nerve endings to go to the brain and say, we need stress relief. We need pain relief. And you just do it on the palm of your hand, and you can also do it on the thumb. Just walk the thumb or each of the fingers, you can do that. You can also do it on the back of the hand as well, the walking sensation. When you do this, you also want to remember to deep breathe, relax. I'm relieving stress. I'm relieving pain. And you're doing this. That is what I say, no matter what's going on and you start feeling tense and stressed, remember to just walk the palm of your hand.
Interesting.
Your hands have, and see, the thing about the hands is, remember now, we don't value our hands, nor do we value our feet. But if you think about it, all of those nerve endings, you have 2,500 nerve endings in your hands and 7,200 nerve endings in your feet that connect to every organ and system in the body. And just that little technique there can activate wherever the stress that's going on in your body, it can activate it. And that's what you do to calm yourself down. Because the one thing you have to remember, it does not matter what treatment, what medication you're on, what therapy you're doing, the body cannot heal itself until it gets in a state of rest and relaxation. That's the concept. Once you get into that state, now you put yourself in the position to work with your practitioner. You put yourself in the position to work with your body in the healing process.
It's that parasympathetic activation and suppressing that sympathetic fight or flight. So interesting.
Yes.
So many thoughts come to mind. I mean, I had a patient recently who was struggling with back pain, and
Mhm.
I was just like, I don't have anything for you, and I'm not putting you on opiates. That's crazy. Sent her to a chiropractor, no, acupuncturist, and it, the acupuncturists didn't even do acupuncture. They did taping of the feet and recommended like
Yeah.
for this patient specifically, like double layer socks. Don't ever let your feet get cold. She
Yes.
comes back a month or two later, all the pain's gone, and she's just wearing like, slippers instead of walking on the cold floor, making really being thoughtful about protecting those feet. And that was it. That her all the pain was just coming from this like lack of attention to the feet and sort of this discomfort. And so now you've given me an explanation of why that was so effective, because I really didn't get it. I didn't get how some tape and some socks helped her back pain, but it sure helped. It
But
actually, it was curative in this case.
what the key, it goes back to what I said about the power of touch. And touch comes in all kind of ways. And we have to understand when we say touch, what that actually means. And the example you just gave with your patient, look at the integrative approach. We dealt with a problem and then we integrated with an acupuncturist that did what? Found some other avenues in their toolbox to integrate. It wasn't just acupuncture that we're going to do. We're going to look at the taping. We can look at tapping. This is what when I say relieve pain first before treatment, because now once you get the pain relieved, now you look at the integrative approaches that will complement what's needed to relieve the actual pain problem. And when I say this, in terms of how we've got to look at the power, how powerful touch is, we may not realize this, but there are two very powerful healing words that's connected to touch. And those two powerful words are thank you. Thank you is the most powerful two healing words that you can verbalize, and it brings about a healing. Think about you open a door for someone and they say, thank you. Remember we talked about the energy exchange. Look at the exchange that went on. And that person who opened the door may be having a bad day, but they just open the door, because they feel, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do, open the door. But they said, thank you. And that response dictated a healing process because the nerve endings heard that and delivered that message to the brain, which was able to do something to change the way you're feeling. Think about somebody who may be going through, like you talked about putting your hands on somebody who may be going through an emotional trying time. And all you do is look at them and smile and say, it's going to be better. It's not as bad as you think. And what does that do? Uplift them. That was a healing. That was a touching, healing moment. We've got to understand how powerful we are because that's the energy exchange. Because I live in stress capital US of A, and when we're driving through the streets and all of a sudden you may be trying to get over in your car and nobody's going to let you in, but some kind soul holds back and lets you in, and you raise your hand up as a gesture to say thank you. And that may have been the very thing that made that person's day and they didn't, and you didn't know that. But just because they stopped, you said thank you, and it blessed their day in some kind of way. These are all little small things that allows us to bring out the healing energy that we have inside of us that not only helps the person we're exchanging with, but it comes back to us tenfold. That's how we've got to start seeing the power of touch as it relates to healing. And that's why reflexology, I say, lays the foundation. It's the bridge work. It's the bridge to get you to the other side. It lays the foundation. And because it's so basic and so simplistic, and for me personally, I'm at the stage in my life right now where I see the importance of passing the baton. And I'm going to share this with your listeners. We've got to stop making it so hard for our young people to receive healing. When we get stressed out, we know what to do to relieve stress, but we're not sharing that information with our young people. And one of the things I do is I teach young people between the ages of 10 to 18 how to use reflexology as a stress relieving tool they can put in their tool bag. And I do this for the purpose of not do as I say. I'm going to teach you some basic techniques, but I'm doing this for you to find a way that you can use this to heal, to relieve stress, to relieve pain, and change how you normally touch. Because when you do those things that are violent, when you do those things that are, that's a form of touch, but that's touch in a negative way. How do we turn it around? And that's what the book is all about, teaching families how to return back to using touch. And the first touch that you have to do is what I always say when it comes to young people, take some time to just listen. You don't have to agree with what they're saying, but just listen, because you'll learn so many things that you didn't even know was on their mind, because now they are being more open with you. And that's how we start returning touch as a healing tool for our families.
It brings so many thoughts to mind. You know, speaking to your comment on thank you, I think gratitude is just lost. Like we
Yes,
forgot to be gracious
yes,
and appreciate each other. And you know, I kind of harp on people sometimes when they're yelling at my front office staff over like a $20 copay, and I'm like, man, that person's just there to try to help. You don't need to yell at them. It's hard. Insurances are hard. Navigating healthcare is hard. We
yes,
can just be grateful for each other sometimes, and then we
yes.
can all work together. You don't need to be so hostile. Everyone is not the enemy. It's a important message to remember to be gracious,
Mhm,
be
mhm.
grateful, and
Yeah,
and constantly kind of make that a conscious effort
yes.
to move through it. Another thing that came to mind, which I have to mention, is so I grew up. I'm Russian, and
Mhm,
very touchy-feely culture compared to
mhm.
American. And I grew up with an American family too that really took me in when I was young. And really, that's what
Yes.
I am. I'm like this Russian guy who grew up in America that really integrated like two cultures. And the one difference that I just, you just really brought it to the front of my mind was, well, growing up, the American family, there wasn't a lot of touch. There was a lot of like cool things that we did. We went skiing and went to cool events and music and sports, and that was great. And it created very powerful bonds. But there's a lot of anxiety left there. When I was a little boy, every night we'd be watching TV and my dad would rub my ear. So speaking to
Ah.
the ear. And I hadn't thought about it in my whole life until you said
Mhm.
this about reflexology. And that is it was the ultimate like relax little kid. I was a hyper little kid, really like
Mhm.
kind of all over the place. Not ADD, just like I couldn't
Right.
come down, you know. I was just always trying to do something. And at the end of the night, you know, how did he relax? My dad would always do this, and I don't know if he was conscious of it. I think it's very much ingrained in the Russian culture to just
Mhm.
touch and hug and kiss, and it's
Mhm.
normal. It's just like it's
Mhm.
just what is normal in our culture. And he would always do that at the end of the night, and it would always calm me down. And it resonates very much with what you're saying. That's he was calming down my sympathetic response. He was putting
Right.
me into a parasympathetic state and letting
Yeah.
all those nerve conduction pathways wake
Yeah.
up and do their thing and let me relax. And how special that was, and how lucky I was to have that. And I guess that's what when dad was doing reflexology on me, he just didn't
Yes.
have a word
Yeah.
for it, huh?
And see, the other thing too is what you just said. When we talk about healthcare, remember when you asked me how did I get started, I told you I grew up on home remedies. We've got to understand our cultural connection to our healing process. And in Western medicine, it fails to look at the cultural connection. And the cultural connection is very important in terms of how we heal. And when we disconnect from our cultural connection, it's putting us in a foreign situation that's uncomfortable for us. And like, that example, that was an excellent example you gave going back to your cultural connection. And I always tell my clients, if you can be around anybody who's older in your family, just go spend some time and ask them about what did they do? How did they grow up with healing? When this happened, what happened? You'd be surprised what you learned and how connected you are to that process.
And just because there's not 100 studies on this stuff doesn't mean it's not real. It's very real.
Yes,
History and our ancestry will guide us. We don't
yes,
need a study for everything.
yes,
Also, studies have dramatic limitations. Maybe this sounds off topic to you, but there's these veins, there's these connections between all of these conversations, and this is one of them.
mhm,
It's that it's Western medicine is powerful, but so is everything else.
yes,
Everything else cannot be thrown into the trash can because it can't be studied the way that we want to. No, we'll never come up with a double-blind placebo-controlled study for reflexology. It's not possible. Just like it's not
exactly.
possible to do that with a lot of like the nutrition issues that come up. What's the
Yes,
right thing to eat? Well, you can't
yes,
do double-blind placebo-controlled studies on this kind of stuff, or it's extremely financially burdensome and it's just never going to get done. But that doesn't mean it's not important, and that's why we're here talking
exactly.
about it. So important. So like who should pick up every family should pick up this book to better understand how to touch and how to communicate through touch. Is this someone who's listening? I guess because I want people to learn more about it. Who are those people? Who did you write this book for? Is it for me, the doctor, that needs to learn about reflexology, or is it for families to work together to help each other?
The book was initially designed for families, but it's open to everybody who's looking for an alternative way to relieve stress and pain using their hands. The book is broken down in categories from infants all the way to seniors. I didn't leave anybody out. And so that way you can look at this. That's why I call this like a self help guide. That's really what this is. It's a self help guide to be able to help you find ways to relieve stress and pain, and mainly open up the lines of communication, which is the foundation of how healing begins. The thing that I like to share, when we become adults, we get caught up in a structured box scenario of, well, this is how you're supposed to be. But I tell everybody, I tell all of my clients, find a day when you can let that little girl and that little boy come out and play. Trust me, it will probably be the most healing experience that you've ever gone through, to be able to say, today I'm going to be silly. Today I'm going to do something that no one would ever expect me to do because I'm letting the child in me come out. And when that child comes out, now you're back into, put yourself in a situation to heal because you're releasing everything that puts you in that structured box. I think we spend too much time taking each and every day so seriously. And that's not how we're supposed to live. We're supposed to be what you opened up with. We are free spirits. And when you understand that, that's when life becomes fun for you.
That just, let's write that down because that's what everyone needs to hear. That's got to be the most important message. Letting that childlike freedom guide us instead of just being so overly intellectualize everything and look for some kind of magical answers in the blood work. Which I love blood work, like I look at
Sure.
thousands of pieces of blood work and I can make amazing inferences from it,
Yes.
and so it's very powerful, but that's not often the solution. And sometimes, I find all sorts of interesting things, but it's not the solution for what you're actually in there for, and I do think that there's just something so important about connecting to her and that childhood sort of naivety. It's ingrained in us from thousands and thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
So that's back to that ancestry piece. We're connecting
Yeah.
back to how we always did it before we had all these powerful tools, and we over rely on them, and we need to integrate, like you said.
It's so important. And if we understand that, that's how you'll be able to kick the stress problems out of your life when you can get that childlike spirit coming back in, because if you look at children before they get put into that structured environment, they're very free flowing. I
Hmm.
mean, nothing bothers them. I mean, they are so curious. They're very creative. I mean, that's their natural instinct. And that's who we are. And we need to be able to get back to that because that's when I really believe that the word that we throw around loosely called peace, that's when you really find inner peace, when you can get that, let that child come out and play. That's when you understand what peace really is in your life and in your world.
Amen. Doctor, so as we wrap up, I'm sure people are going to want to learn more about what you're going to do. So please check out Reflexology today, a family affair. But how can people reach you? How can they work with you? Tell us how they can reach out to you.
Thank you for the opportunity. You can go to my website, focusonhealing.com. On my website, you can also get my book, but I also encourage you, when you go to my website, go to the comment section, write down any questions, any concerns you have. I will definitely get back to you because that's what I do. My job is to help you find other solutions to relieving pain and stress. I guess you could say that's my toy. I like being able to hear people talk to me about their different problems related to stress and pain and how we together can find some workable solutions. And that's what I do. And that's available on my website. Also, I too host a podcast called the Touchology Wellness Experience. And that's touchologywellnessexperience.com. And I share different points of views as it relates to various practitioners and various experts sharing their experience in terms of using medication-free approaches and therapies in terms of relieving pain and stress. And I also will end with, in the African culture, when we visit someone's home for the first time, you never come without bringing a gift. and I have a gift for you and for your listeners. I put together a poster on relieving pain and stress, medication free. And all you do is you go to touchology, reflexology.com and download the poster. And that's my gift to you for spending this time with me in terms of listening to the information that I have shared.
I can't wait. I'm gonna go download that right now. And I encourage everyone to as well. Dr. Olatunde, thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom, and for your passion helping people. Thank you everyone for listening. And with that, goodbye, everyone.